Michael Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald Times with us. And Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Jim. How are you doing?
Good, good. Mike Woodson presser coming up today ahead of the Northwestern game, Indiana, another home game for Indiana. And we used to be able to say that, hey, this is almost a must win. There are no must wins for Indiana anymore. And that's sad to say with 6 games left in the season. There are no must win games because I don't know what. I guess if they're shooting for the NIT, possibly, but the bigger question is building this team. The eyes have to be on next year now, and differences because they just last year after the loss to Miami, it was very evident where they were as far as matching up with other teams athletically, and boy. A year later, we find them in the same exact position as not having the ability to do that, which I know that they lost Xavier Johnson, but that's one player. They just don't have the horses that are running the right race.
Well, yeah, and I think it's hard to project. I mean, they probably internally have an idea of it, but, who does leave, too, enter the transfer portal, leave for the draft. I mean, Khalil Ware has been sort of, late first round, second round kind of projected pick. Mackenzie Mbako doesn't seem like he's done enough, but, his hopes were being one and done. Who hits the transfer portal as well? You got Trey Galloway, who has, I think, a year of eligibility left. Does he come back? I mean, so you got a lot of questions in terms of how many spots you're going to have open and what you're going to need. I mean, you got Liam McNeely right now, obviously locked in, but they're certainly going to need to do some work in the spring to sort of fill this out and sort of put the pieces back together. And obviously, they need shooters no matter what happens. And so, what this roster looks like here in 4 weeks could be a lot different.
Yeah, I'm just spitballing. They're losing. I think that they lose Khalil Ware. Obviously, they're going to lose Xavier Johnson. Walker, Anthony Walker, I think is his last year of eligibility. So there's 3. And I think that there's going to be at least 2 players that hit the portal. And if that's the case, that's just that is the total of 5 players with 1 coming in. You still have to fill 4 spots. This is where they failed last season in filling the spots with the needed personnel. They went deeper on the interior with players like Walker and Sparks and still had an open scholarship and just did not fill the shooting needs. And the bigger question for me is when Mike's asked a direct question, you're just getting the same old cliche answers. And I would love to know just on free throw shooting, they're 325th out of 351 teams. That's not an accident. It doesn't just happen. And simply we hear that, they're shooting free throws. We practice. Well, okay, well, that's not enough. There has to be a plan to change being the 325th worst shooting free throw team in the country. And earlier I said, I don't care if it requires standing behind guys with cymbals and playing music in the gym on Mach 10 sound, but something has to be done differently. And it's as if they're using the same old approach.
Well, but I mean, at some point you are what you are, right? I mean, we're at the point in the season where they just might not be a very good free throw shooting team, and they're going to need to kind of reconfigure things. I mean, they're just not a good shooting team in general. Outside, they've got the big guys and Khalil Ware and Malik Renew shoot well in the post, but I mean, in terms of shooting at the perimeter, they're just not a good shooting team. So they're going to need guys to sort of, I think, change that. I mean, practice habits and all that. this is every team practices free throws. I don't think this is sort of something that's like related to that they're just not doing it. But I mean, I just don't think they have the right pieces right now. And people were kind of concerned about how the roster was built at the beginning of the season, and I think those kind of fears came to fruition that they just didn't have enough shooters. And then when you lose Xavier Johnson in terms of your guard play, which was sort of thin to begin with. I mean, Gabe Cupps is in a tough spot. I mean, he played really well against Northwestern, but offensively, he's not the guy you kind of fear right now. And so I think it's tough. I think this team's in a tough spot in terms of trying to generate offense with what they're playing and what kind of the roster, the way it's built.
Yeah, I agree with that. You have some good pieces on the inside, but even with the pieces around, the offense does not seem to lend itself to being anything other than an inside out team again, which is something that they have been for the last couple of years. And, was told, hey, that things are going to change this year, this, that, and the other thing. And it still hasn't. You've got guys like Trey Galloway. I know he's not leading 3-point shooter in the country. Last year he had a decent on a smaller sample size. Mackenzie Mbako, it just doesn't seem like they're getting him into a rhythm. I don't know if that's partly his fault and partly the fault of the offense itself, but there just doesn't seem. I don't know. It's shooters shoot, and there just doesn't seem to be the confidence by these guys to take certain shots a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that they've struggled with confidence, I think, all season. I think they've struggled with sort of, I wrote about urgency and focus. You've kind of seen, at home they've been better, but on the road they've really struggled. It's just a team Mike Woodson's talked about kind of their youth all season, or inexperience. I think that certainly played a role. When we talk about Mackenzie Mbako, he's sort of been up and down at times. And when he's looked confident, been in the flow of the game, you saw in that second half, I think against Northwestern, what he can do. But it's just not consistent enough. And so when you're lacking that consistency, teams take advantage, and Mike Woodson likes to say, or has liked to say all season, they played well in spurts, but it's just not enough, especially at this point in the season. I think you thought that they'd get better. There'd be an arc to the season where, non-conference schedule, I thought they did what they needed to do. Big Ten, they'd start, maybe take a few lumps early, but then they'd slowly start getting better, and they haven't do that. They've tapered off and sort of seem to now be kind of in a malaise that they're, not playing for as much, because obviously I think the NCAA tournament hopes have gone away, and I think that's sort of impacted their play on the court.
I agree with that. But I think that the bigger question is thinking that they were going to be better, but what was being done to give hope to that? Just time, just normal practice and the games, or what specifically is being done to improve things? That would be my question. But even if you ask that, I still think you're just going to get, well, we got to keep grinding and we got to keep working and yada, yada, yada. But what are you doing specifically to get better? I don't know that they are doing anything different.
Well, and at some point, the answer might be that they're just limited by what they have, that they didn't construct the roster right. And he's not, nobody's going to say that publicly. So, and you can't throw your guys under the bus. So what you can say is we're going to keep working. So I think there is some sort of limit to it that, probably if you asked him, would truth serum, you should have added another shooter with that extra scholarship spot. Yeah. But he doesn't like to think about woulda, coulda, shoulda, and he's going to more focus on here's where we are. And so, in terms of wanting sort of answers, I think that's probably all we're going to get.
See, to me, that's the problem, not having any accountability. That it gives me worry when they won't when they're not accountable for it. I mean, just be accountable. I'm fine with it. but just be
I
accountable
think being
for it.
accountable would I think part of it is he doesn't want to throw if you say you messed up constructing the roster, you're technically throwing the guys you have under the bus. And so coaches don't like to do that because they don't want to say, well, these guys did not play as well as I thought they would. You know what I'm saying? It's like they
Well,
hate
he could
that.
just say, I didn't get them the help that they need.
Maybe, but that's fair.
And I get what you're saying. I understand. There's a fine line that you have to walk because it's a lot of reasons. Number one, you don't want to take away if any confidence that they might have
Right.
by that. And I'm not suggesting that. It's just to be accountable for the fact that you did not bring in that guy in that open scholarship, that you could have brought in another guy that could have helped make Trey Galloway's job easier, that could have done a lot of things, that could have opened up things.
Well, and then the problem
That's
did
what
get
I'm talking
worse.
about.
If Xavier Johnson had been healthy all year, it might not have been such a bad in terms of the guards, having some depth. But obviously that just made it so much worse. Where he's missed 6 or 7 games earlier, and now is going to end up missing most of the season. And one injury, the injuries were kind of not connected to last year's injury. So it was, more like, not something that they could have foreseen, him hurting his elbow, so that is part is tough. But like you said, you want an insurance policy, but, cause it's not like that scholarship would come in handy next year, cause you're going to have to replace, like you said, 5 or 6 guys, no matter what, anyway. It's not like that would have boosted you up. Like you needed that spot. So yeah, it is. I think they did clearly make a mistake in terms of not getting an extra piece, but that they are where they are. There's nothing you can do about it now.
Exactly. And so they do have 6 games left in this season. What does the focus need to be for them? Because NCAA tournament obviously off the table here, but what do they need to look at, focus on, gear towards?
Well, I still think this team, we talked about guys entering the transfer portal, but if there were going to be guys that do come back, some of the younger guys, a run in the NIT would not be a bad thing. That's what sort of helped the women sort of build this thing out. I think that extra playing time, extra practice wouldn't be the worst thing for this team. I think trying to win a game or two in the Big Ten tournament would also give them some sort of look. We have some building pieces towards next year as we kind of go into the offseason. I think if you sort of really crash and burn here these last 6 games, you're one and done in the Big Ten tournament. Going on the recruiting trail, I know Indiana means something and they have that cachet still, but it makes the job all that much harder. That you look terrible over the last month and a half. I don't think that's the message that they want to sell. I think if you have a message of like, look, we were young, we fit the pieces kind of together, it came together late, but we got there. I think that would have been. I think that certainly wouldn't be a bad thing.